We're very privileged and delighted to be able to welcome 3 different speakers from different parts of the world. We have speakers from the United States, Hungary, and from Scotland, United Kingdom. And we're going to begin with Patrick Stopsky, who is the Human Rights Archivist at the David M. Rubenstein Rare Books and Manuscripts Library at Duke University in the United States. So Patrick, over to you.
One second, let me just start sharing my screen here. There we go. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Stosky. I serve as the Human Rights Archivist at the Rubenstein Library at Duke University, which is located in Durham, North Carolina in the United States. I want to begin by expressing my thanks to ICA and especially to Maria Paula, Caroline, and Jens for organizing this webinar and bringing us together today on International Human Rights Day. And thank you to all of you who are attending for spending this hour with us to discuss human rights and archives in an academic setting. I've been at Duke now for 18 years, and I've had the opportunity to watch the Human Rights Archive grow from a small set of largely unprocessed collections into a dynamic and expanding collecting area at Duke, one shaped by new partnerships, deeper collaborations, and a steadily increasing role in both research and instruction related to human rights at Duke and in the broader research community. Today, I'm going to offer a brief overview of the Human Rights Archive and its significance within the broader Rubenstein Library ecosystem. I'll also highlight 2 recent examples from our work in collection development and collection management that I think illustrate how we are continuing to build, steward, and activate human rights documentation. Oops. So let me start by talking about our curatorial areas. So the Human Rights Archive is situated within a broader landscape of the Rubenstein Library. One of the library's great strengths is its diversity of curatorial areas. It includes documentary arts, economics, medicine, African American history, women's history, and history of Duke, and a few others. The Human Rights Archive sits within this constellation as a cross-disciplinary collecting program that is deeply connected to our library's mission of documenting lived experience, social transformation, and cultural memory. What this means in practice is that our work, my work, is strengthened by the proximity of these other collecting areas. Human rights documentation doesn't exist in isolation or in a vacuum. Issues of labor, race, health, gender, political movements are intersecting constantly. So being located within a library that already centers these topics allows us to support researchers in a truly holistic way. I also want to say something about the overall organizational structure of the library. So it's important to understand how the Human Rights Archive fits in here. So the Rubenstein includes a collection development department that curates our collections, a technical services department that ensures our collections are processed, preserved, and discoverable, a research services department that works directly with researchers, students, and community partners. We also have an exhibition services and a digital production center, which is essential for digitizing analog materials and supporting long-term digital access to our digital collections. So the Human Rights Archive benefits from each of these units. Our materials often require specialized descriptive work, complex rights considerations, multilingual metadata, and audiovisual preservation. And it's the collaborative structure of the Rubenstein that ensures that we can meet the challenges and support global access to these collections. The Human Rights Archive was founded around 2006 to document and preserve the histories of human rights struggles around the world. Our mission, I think, is simple but also powerful: to ensure that the voices of activists, survivors, and the communities that they work with are preserved and accessible to anyone seeking to understand how human rights movements take shape. The archive grew out of the Rubenstein Library's longstanding commitment to social justice documentation And since the beginning, we had a particularly strong partnership with our faculty in Latin American and Caribbean studies, which is reflected in the nature of our collections today. While we hold some materials tied to the early post-World War II human rights era, most of our work focuses on the modern human rights movement from the 1970s onward. Since its inception, we tried to implement a social justice and human rights approach to our archival work. We, whenever possible, work directly with creators and engage in thoughtful relationship development to understand their needs and desires for their archive. We consider deeply the impact our work will have on them and the communities and individuals they work with. Some of these conversations take years to develop and engage in. We recognize also that in the past, archives have been complicit in colonial extraction of culture and knowledge. We therefore work mainly with US-based activists and organizations. When we have been approached by international activists, we consider carefully if we can responsibly steward such projects. We have no intention of depatriating collections, and we prioritize digitization of these collections to ensure community archives, community access to such archives. Some of our more notable collections include the International Center for Transitional Justice Records, the Marshall Meyer Papers, the Radio Haiti collection, the Southern Poverty Law Center extremist publications, Washington Office on Latin America, and the papers of activists such as Jerome Shestak, Pat Darian, and Abraham Joshua Heschel. Together, these collections show how local struggles and international human rights efforts have shaped one another. Our collecting priorities reflect the range of issues shaping contemporary human rights work. Our key areas of collecting include immigration, incarceration and detention, laborers and workers' rights, health and human rights, transitional justice, and emerging forms of advocacy. We collect across many formats: documents, audiovisual materials, digital files, photographs, ephemera, and web and social media content, because human rights work itself is diverse and frequently multimedia. We also think in terms of activities, we collect documentation of abuses and testimonies, advocacy such as litigation or campaigning, information sharing, and community building as well. So let me talk a little bit about research. We are a research library, and that is our primary goal in collecting, is to build research collections. Research engagement continues to grow significantly. In fiscal year 25, the Rubenstein Library welcomed over 2,600 researchers, and we circulated over 14,000 items. This represents an 11% increase over previous years. I also want to share some of our research demographics to see how, so you can see what kind of researchers are coming. 37% of our researchers are non-Duke, and this includes our international visitors. We are very proud that another 37% are undergraduates from Duke, which reflects the growing integration of primary sources into the undergraduate curriculum at Duke. Last year, we delivered around 60,000 digital reproductions from our collections, which is increasingly how researchers, especially those outside of the US, access our collections. All of this, I think, demonstrates how the Rubenstein Library collections are not only growing in size, but I hope expanding its impact on scholarship, teaching, and public engagement. We are about to enter one of my favorite times of year, not Christmas, but rather research travel grant season. This is our program to support researchers by supporting research access to our collections. These are grants we offer up to $1,500 that enable researchers from around the world to spend dedicated time working with material they might otherwise never be able to consult. The program brings in a diverse group of scholars. Up on the screen here, I have some of the winning grantees from the past 2 years. I give you an idea of the various types of research that is being conducted at the Rubenstein Library and the Human Rights Archive. This includes historians, legal researchers, anthropologists, digital humanists, and artists, each bringing new perspectives that deepen our understanding of the collections. A benefit of these visits is that they often lead to publications, exhibits, works of art, community engagement projects, and new collaborations, things that have a very public-facing side to them. So therefore, these grants don't just support research, they see the next generation of scholarship and multiply the impact of our collections. We have a very strong instruction program at the Rubenstein Library, and the Human Rights Archive participates in that as well. Instruction remains a core component of the Rubenstein Library's work. Last year, I think we had 209 instruction sessions, and we reached over 2,000 students with these instruction sessions. We provide everything from one-shot sessions, so this is a one-time visit to the Rubenstein. We also do multi-week projects, and sometimes we do semester-long collaborations, bringing students into direct contact with primary sources. Our approach emphasizes hands-on inquiry-based learning, where students use archival collections to think critically about evidence, narrative, and historical responsibility. For many undergraduates, this is the first encounter with the ethical and I think often emotional dimensions of human rights documentation. And sometimes perhaps it's even their first visit to an archive. We work with faculty across disciplines. I put up on the screen a few examples of courses that have come in over the last year. So these include classes in history, public policy, global health, culture anthropology, international comparative studies, and visual studies. We tailor each session to the course themes. A session can include analog materials such as case files, field reports, investigations, and photographs, but we also include digital materials such as oral histories, digital photography, and video. The result is a richer learning experience and a deeper appreciation for the diversity of human rights strategies and how archives shape collective memory. Next, I wanted to just talk about two recent projects we've been working on that highlight perhaps how we work around building our collections as well as how we develop relationships with our partners. So I want to talk about first one of our most exciting initiatives in the last few years, which is the Human Rights Digital Storytelling Award. It supports artists and activists creating innovative multimedia documentary projects. It is also a great example of our cross-library collaboration. So it is a partnership with the Archive of Documentary Arts, which is another one of our curatorial areas. And it relies heavily on the expertise of our digital archivist as well as our audiovisual archivist as we build these collections. Digital storytelling, which combines video, audio, photography, soundscapes, and text, has become a key tool in human rights work. This award recognizes creators who are expanding what documentary practice can look like today and ensures that that work will be preserved for long-term research. The award winner receives a $3,500 prize, and they collaborate with our archivist to develop an archival collection that reflects their practice. No copyright transfer is required. This gives the creators agency over how their work circulates. The award is digital first so that we can work with global artists without practicing cultural extraction and appropriation. We've made 3 awards so far. Our winners have included Leonard, which is a podcast about the Native American activist and political prisoner Leonard Peltier. We've also worked on a photo project by a Mayan photographer who documented the 2012 and through 2015 genocide trials of the former Guatemalan dictator Efrain Rios Montt. And our most recent winner is a podcast called Inside Kabul, which tells the story of 2 young women, 2 young friends whose lives were upended when the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan in the summer of 2021. These 2 young women recorded their experience using WhatsApp and collaborated with a French journalist to develop the podcast. And the archive will be those WhatsApp messages that record their experiences in life as they negotiated this new life they were living. So this initiative strengthens our digital collecting strategy and brings contemporary voices into the archive, especially from communities underrepresented in traditional collections. Finally, I wanted to talk about the Crowing Rooster Arts Partnership. So the Crowing Rooster Arts Partnership is one of the most significant collection management projects we've undertaken recently. Crowing Rooster Arts, or CRA, is a New York-based nonprofit founded in 1992 that produced documentary film, video, and music chronicling Haiti's struggle for democracy, its history, and its culture. Their archive includes more than 25 short films, 8 full-length documentaries, dozens of music and poetry recordings, and a vast body of raw 16 millimeter film footage. I think it totals over 900 hours of footage. The digital footprint is about 157 terabytes. It's quite large. CRA is committed to wide access to the collection. They completed digitization of the majority of the collection themselves and have agreed to make the digitized video available under a Creative Commons license. So this aligned well with how the Human Rights Archive approaches international collections, and this made them for an ideal partner. In addition, this project also aligns beautifully with the other collaborations and partnerships we've established with the Haitian community, including Radio Haiti, the Washington Office on Latin America, and the National Coalition for Haitian Rights. Year-long relationship building process led to our visit in November 2024. I and our audiovisual archivist visited their offices in New York City, where we reviewed materials, we assessed preservation needs, and finalized a gift agreement. And the collection arrived at Duke in January 2025. CRA practiced exemplary archival stewardship. They migrated their materials across formats. So starting from film, they then migrated that to videotape, and then they migrated to digital. But they never discarded earlier generations. So that whole archive is there. Our immediate goal is to stabilize those original film elements and to provide researcher access using the MP4 files that we will link to the descriptions in CRA's internal databases. Over time, we'll work towards a high-resolution film scanning, deeper processing, and building out public access platforms. The collection of MP4s and the organizational records are now open for research. We just published the collection guide a few weeks ago, so we're very excited about that. So together, I hope these efforts, research support, instruction, new collecting initiatives, and long-term preservation partnerships demonstrate how the Human Rights Archive's commitment to documenting global movements for justice makes these histories accessible to the communities that need them. Our work is rooted in collaboration and trust and the belief that archives play a vital role in shaping more just futures. And then a final thank you from myself and ChatGPT. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And thank you for telling us about those absolutely fascinating collections, but also what seems to be really meaningful projects that you're doing. So that was really good to hear. And also just the powerful way that you're connecting with the students that you have as well. So you've got lots of celebratory icons coming up. But I have lots of questions, but what we're going to do is leave the questions until the end after all of the speakers have talked. We're going to use the chat for the questions. So if you do have anything pops into your head while the speakers are talking, please use the chat function, and then we can come back to the questions at the end. So don't be shy about putting in questions just now. But first of all, we'll move on to our second speaker. And I'm really pleased to be able to welcome Sabah Silaji, who's the Chief Archivist and Head of the Human Rights Programme at the Blinken OSA Archivum at the Central European University in Budapest. So Sabah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline, for the introduction. Let me just share my screen with you.
That's perfect.
Yeah, I think we're all good. Thank you very much for organizing this webinar and for having me among the presenters. It's really an honor to be here on International Human Rights Day. Thanks, Patrick, for this superb presentation. What I would like to talk about today is briefly introducing our institution, uh, but also even more so focusing on how a human rights archive within a university environment can accomplish its core mission um, in an increasingly hostile environment in a space where um, the conditions for promoting human rights and social justice are worsening and shrinking by the day. Um, as you can see on the first slide, Plinkano SAHR Archivum is part of the Central European University, which was established in 1991 in three East European cities, Budapest, Prague, and Warsaw. And we have been part of the university since the establishment of the archive, which was in 1995. In academic year 2019 to 2020, the university was expelled from Hungary by the current government. And I will get back to this later on because this had a significant impact on our activities. The Blinkano SAHR Archivum is an international archives, research, and education center, as well as an urban cultural venue, which preserves and makes available records relating to the history of communism and the Cold War and human rights movements and violations worldwide. Um, we are also focusing on post-authoritarian, post-conflict societies from after 1990, and more recently of these democracies shrinking and going backsliding into more authoritarian regimes, and also more recently, we collect stories and collections of marginalized communities, including ethnic, religious, and sexual minorities and people with disabilities. The archives also serves as a haven for um, collections and even archivists at risk. And we promote free, open, and equal access to recorded information in a welcoming archival infrastructure and research environment. As you can see, we have four main areas of activities besides being a repository. We are also a research institution. We host researchers. We do our own research. So many of my colleagues have their own research topics within the archives because we regard archiving and questions related to collection development and outreach not only as a source but also as a problem to be explored. And we host scholarship program which is funded by the International Visegrad Fund to researchers coming to Budapest and doing research in our collections. We teach courses related to archives, to our collections, and to various problems connected to archiving on BA, MA, and PhD level. We also cooperate with local universities and try to use our collections in teaching. But in the past few years, we have increased our outreach towards younger audiences, meaning high schools, and also we are involved in high school teacher training. We have a very strong public history or public engagement program. We have an exhibition hall in our building, a gallery where we have mounted over 130 exhibitions since 1996. We regularly run a human rights documentary film festival called Versio, which had its 23rd edition just this past November. And the festival is very important for our collection development because it is one of those rare festivals which archive themselves. And as a result of this work, our collections include over 6,000 recent documentary films related to various human rights issues. And we also host academic and performative events in our building. Our mission is thus to collect, preserve, and make available sources for research. As I mentioned, we serve as a haven for endangered collections. We were part of the Safe Haven for Archives at Risk project run by Swiss Peace. We even translated the protocols into the Hungarian language. And one of our main concerns in terms of collection development is to include voices from the periphery of our society. This is our wonderful building so that you get a feel of the space where we work every day. Some of our major collections are spread among these three main topics or areas of interest: communism, Cold War and their afterlives, human rights and social justice. And since we are the official archive of the Central European University, we preserve seminar records related to its foundation and history since 1991. And we are also the historical archives of the Open Society Foundations, which include collections on various human rights related topics such as forced migration or constitutionalism in the early 90s in Eastern Europe and so on. So you can see from this topical and geographical distribution of our main collections that this archives is a repository of systemic human rights violations and state-sponsored political violence, censorship and propaganda, dissent and political opposition movements, and religious and cultural resistance, and following the fall of communism, of transition to constitutional democracies. What is important to note that these documents are proving increasingly meaningful and useful sources for critical inquiry and memory work, given the democratic backsliding in European and non-European countries as well. The resurfacing of new, but in fact old and reinterpreted conflict zones and the emergence of authoritarian and populist trends globally, the increasing need to understand what went wrong subsequent to the collapse of communism, the roots and causes of these anti-democratic changes, and to find antidotes by examining past forms of oppression and rights violations, but also instances of resistance and resilience. This is a little bit like a fact sheet of our collections. This is what we have in terms of numbers and formats. We have documents coming in 40 languages, and although some of the numbers you can see there as imprints of digital content in our various collections, and some of these numbers may seem impressive. However, they only constitute, at least in the textual records, just a fraction of what we have. The moving image and the sound recordings are the digital version of these media is close to the um, close to completion, and we have 15 terabytes of digital records and around 19,000 library items, which are made accessible and researchable through various means, the online catalog and the research cloud and curated collections and thematic guides or blog posts that we write with our colleagues, or international aggregator sites such as the European Digital Library, the Yerusha portal for Jewish life and culture, and some others. In terms of how we work with these collections, the Archivum actually positions itself at the intersection of a socially conscious mainstream archival institution and broadly conceived community archives, which involves representatives of affected communities or communities inscribed in its records in the archival work, including appraisal, cataloging, and exhibitions. It offers support, transfers knowledge, and on occasion repatriates copies of relevant documents to these communities. Throughout its various activities, the Archivum strives to recontextualize and mobilize records in its care. For evidential, human rights, and social justice purposes and memory work. As an activist archive, it reflects on and offers professional responses to matters of societal concern, including human rights abuses and social injustice, historical oblivion and revisionism, genocide denial and triumphalism, political propaganda, and misappropriation of memory and mnemonic practices. In terms of archival methodology, we try to apply a critical, self-reflective re-archiving, serving human rights and social justice purposes. We do make archival interventions to address epistemic harm that is inherent in the nature of the archival work. And one of our main activities is to turn the archives inside out to creatively reuse and recontextualize records in various public programs and memory projects. I would like to turn now to the last decade of our activities and speak about four distinctive chapters in the life of the Archivum, where some of these characteristic features and signature activities were put in a much sharper focus by the worsening of the geopolitical situation in Hungary and in the neighboring countries. I would begin and then to see how the archives reacted or reflected on these events and trends. The first one, the first series of events, I should say, was the European refugee crisis of 2015-16, which and actually the hostility of Hungary and the neighboring countries towards this giant wave of migrants coming from various parts of the world, which prompted the Archivum to turn, as Vern Harris said, a sense of responsibility into a practice of hospitality. So, taking literally this into consideration, we used the Archivum building as a storage space for collecting aid for refugees in the very first days of this migration crisis. Then over the years, we developed several curated collections which focused on understanding the roots of migration and the individual tragedies behind each and every experience by focusing first on Hungarian refugees who left the country after the 1956 revolution by thousands, and most of them found new homes in the US. And also, we recatalogued and repurposed our human rights documentary film collection from the perspective of refugees and migrants. As our mother institution, CEU started a learning initiative for refugees. We took part in these endeavors and held classes in the archives for refugee students. Whereas within the Versio Film Festival, we began a thematic chapter in cooperation with the local office of UNHCR on people on the move. Now, the second big event was for us the expulsion of CEU from Hungary in 2019-2010, which basically coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic and the beginning of the emergency governing, which is still ongoing in Hungary ever since. The expulsion of the university and its teaching programs to Vienna threatened us to lose legal protection, the dismembering of our academic community, because the Archivum is not an independent entity, it's part of CEU. And suddenly we found ourselves very much alone here in Budapest, with much of the academic community transferred to Vienna. What we first did was to document attacks on academic freedom and critical thinking, but also instances of support that we received from higher education organizations and partner institutions. Instead of retrieving behind some defense line, we decided to expand our reach, our online reach in the first place. We developed new curated collections and began new cooperations with partner institutions. This is the time when the Archivum helped develop, design, and establish a research archive at the Srebrenica Memorial Center in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we reacted on this new situation by putting up exhibitions on fearless speech, the power of expressing truth in public, on Holocaust memory or forgery in history. And we organized our first ever exhibition on ourselves, a sort of collection highlights about the Archivum. And the two other events that or series of events that I would like to mention is the anti-LGBTQI campaign in Hungary, to which spans over a fairly long period and is still ongoing. You can see some of the milestones of this very rocky road until present day. So together with LGBTQI NGOs, we mounted first an online exhibition on gay and lesbian histories, this was during the time of the pandemic. So when this was over, we turned it into a physical exhibition the next year to include trans and intersex people in the story. and specifically because in 2020 the legal recognition of trans and intersex people was banned in Hungary, and we started still lasting cooperation with representatives of Roma communities, the largest ethnic minority in Hungary, to develop a Roma archive. And I guess I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna conclude with the most recent part of our activities, which started in February 2022 with the full-scale Russian invasion and aggression in Ukraine. Together with the university here in Budapest, so the programs that remained here, the non-teaching programs, we devised an invisible university for Ukraine, which is practically a certificate program for Ukrainian university students, undergrad and graduate students. It's a form of online teaching where participants are based either in Ukraine or are in exile in different countries of Europe, so they can connect online and attend various courses, including courses on history, on recent history, involving archival documents as well. We started together with the Golf Museum in Canada, an archival summer school for early career Ukrainian archivists. We created another curated collection featuring documents from our collections on how Ukraine achieved independence and freedom following the dissolution of the former Soviet Union. We host archivists and scholars at risk within our premises and also within the Visegrad Fellowship programs. And we started hosting events and exhibitions related to the recent war in Ukraine. So I'm hoping that by featuring some of these activities, I was able to shed some light into various strategies with which archives promoting human rights can respond on professional grounds to attempts at shrinking the public space, shrinking the space for human rights and social justice and oppression of marginalized communities. An effort in which the archives, although itself found itself in a very strange and restrained environment, decided to reach out even more and become more open instead of reducing its activities and retire in some kind of defensive. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for that. I personally, I found that incredibly moving. Thank you to you and your colleagues for all the work that you're doing. I think it was really important that you shared that with us, because you really demonstrated that archivists can have both a profound and a practical impact. And I think you've really tried to do that in the field of human rights. So thank you. And I just really like the way that you were talking about turning the archive inside out. And I think we should do more of that, all of us. So thank you.
Thank you.
So let's move on to our last speaker there. So we're now going to listen to Carl McGee, who's from the University of Stirling in Scotland. So I'll hand it over to you, Carl.
Thanks, Caroline, and thank you to the ICA for the invitation to speak at this event today. It's my turn to share my screen. Right, there we go. So what I want to do today is in this talk is, I suppose, move from the global and political, which we've heard about in the previous two excellent presentations, to kind of look at the personal, and in particular talk about the role of that the University of Stirling Archives played in a recent project which took a collaborative approach to capturing and preserving the archives of childhood in care. So the Archiving Residential Children's Home project was a 3-year research project that explored record keeping practices of everyday group life for children in residential care in Scotland and Germany. Examining past record keeping, current practices and future uses, the project explored how day-to-day records can be created and kept to best support care experienced individuals' identity and memory needs. The collaboration between the research teams in Scotland and Germany developed out of existing academic links and was made possible by funding from a collaborative research scheme in the UK and Germany. And the collaborative nature of the project allowed the opportunity to explore the various similarities and differences in the life experiences of children in residential care in both countries, both historically and now. And the research teams in each country worked with large charities with substantial archive collections who have a continuing focus on providing residential children's homes for children and young people. So I think just talking about the project is kind of useful to take a step back and look to trace the kind of wider climate in relation to rights and records in Scotland, which kind of led into our particular project. So it's kind of three key documents, 3 key elements just to point out. If we go back to 2007, the SAHR report was published, and this was a comprehensive investigation into historical abuse in Scotland's childcare sector from the 1950s through to the 1990s. The report identified a host of failings, including serious problems related to the proper care and management of records. And the SAHR report was one of the key factors that led to the Public Records Scotland Act in 2011, the first public records legislation passed in Scotland in over 70 years. The Act lays out the responsibilities of public authorities for the proper management of their records. And the impact of the Public Records Scotland Act extended to organisations not covered by the legislation, with the examples of best practice demonstrated by the Act being taken up by many private and voluntary organisations, including charities. And if we move to the care sector, the Promise was the final publication of an independent care review launched by the Scottish Government, which began in 2017. And the Promise basically created a new ambition for Scotland that, and I quote, "All its children and young people will grow up loved, safe and respected so that they will realise their full potential." To realise this ambition, the Independent Care Review set out over 80 recommendations on what must be done to overhaul the care system in Scotland, including better record keeping. So this wider concern with and commitment to improving both the care system and its record keeping practices in Scotland provided the background to our project. And in terms of our input into the project, the research project was basically the intersection of a network of relationships that developed between ourselves in the University Archives, academic colleagues in the Faculty of Social Science, and Aberlour Children's Charity, which is one of Scotland's largest children's charities, which has helped children and their families since 1875. So in terms of our input into the project, one important thing to stress was the importance of being involved in the development of the project right from the start. And we were basically able to ensure that archives were both used and supported to enable research access. The actual timeline of how the project developed, there was a kind of parallel process, separate to the research project. We actually took in the archives of Aberlour Children's Charity. Aberlour were one of those organisations I mentioned that took their own record keeping responsibility seriously in the wake of the various inquiries and reports which I have mentioned. Aberlour themselves have a huge archive dating back to 1875 when they opened their first orphanage. So in a parallel process, we were able to, we took in the archive of Aberlour Children's Charity. We managed to secure funding from the UK National Archives funding schemes to fund the cataloguing of the collection. And in parallel with that, the archiving research residential children's homes project developed, as I say, in parallel. And the research project had three elements, which were basically to start by looking at the past, with research teams in Scotland and Germany looking at his historical records contained in the archives, moving to look at the present, and then making recommendations for the future. So in the time that's left to me, I just want to kind of pull out three main themes that came out of the research project, which connect to archives and record keeping. So the first kind of main point I'd like to make is recognizing the emotional impact of record keeping practices on the individual. And our project was definitely not the first to recognize the emotional impact of the record keeping system and records access on the individual. So over the last decade, there have been several influential studies that have looked at adult care leavers' experiences of accessing individual social work and case files. Together, they've highlighted the challenges involved in gaining access to records, the frequently obstructive redaction policies, the limited content of case files, and the general confusion around ownership of personal information. And for the individuals wanting to access this information, and in our case, information about their childhoods in care, this quite often leads to frustration, disappointment, and confusion. And you know, one of the findings from the research team in this project is the focus on the individual case file can narrow the information provided to the individual. And when looking at the wider group experience of a childhood spent in care, our project looked beyond the case file. So the research teams in our project kind of delved further into the archives of the groups that we worked with, looking for the kind of accidental capture of information, what our research teams called the whispers in the archive, which include the voices of the children in care. And in the case of Aberlour Children's Charity, this type of material could be found in medical logbooks and daily logbooks, which recorded in great detail the routine of day-to-day life. In the German example, there were punishment books which provided a huge amount of information on the children themselves. And one of the key sources that we found in the Aberlour Charity Archives was the Orphanage magazine, which was a monthly publication which started publication in the 1880s. It was initially produced for subscribers and supporters of the orphanage, but it increasingly became a forum for former residents of the orphanage to connect with each other and to keep in touch. And the magazines provide a much better picture of group life, of the collective experiences shared in the orphanage, such as trips to the seaside and Christmas. And one of our kind of wider contributions to the project and to our work with Aberlour Children's Charity is an ongoing project of the digitization of the orphanage magazines. And we've already added over 300 issues of the magazine to our online catalogue. I'll move on to the kind of second point, and I wanted to kind of say a bit about in terms of this project was the issue of record keeping versus the reality of life. So one of the key things that our project reflected on was the concept of home for the care experienced. And both historical and current care environments were identified as being collective households. This example in this slide from 1927 shows that ideas of the importance of home are nothing new. And residential care is a setting where everyday childhoods are played out alongside other non-related children and adult staff members. In this context, adult caregivers take on many of the day-to-day tasks of parents, supporting children practically, physically, and emotionally, and taking account of their past, present, and future selves. And the long-standing awareness of the importance of remembering and memory sharing tied to the unique aspects of life in residential care were not reflected in the organizational record-keeping practices. And this showed a clear tension in the centrality of shared memories for care leavers against the erasing of the collective experience in the records created and kept. During the research project, we came across a striking example of this disconnect between the lived experience and record keeping in this example provided by a former resident of the orphanage. Ron entered the orphanage in the late 1950s as a 6-month-old baby and lived in the orphanage till he was 16. And it wasn't until he was 6 years old in the playground he was told by another child that in fact he had brothers and sisters who were also in the orphanage. So while Ron and his siblings were broken up and put into groups by age and sex within the different wings of the orphanage, the files in the orphanage's record-keeping system were organized by family unit on paper. So the written records provide an alternative picture of orphanage life to Ron's lived experience. And the final kind of point I just want to touch on is the importance of remembering together as a group, the collective experience of sharing memories. Ron collected his own kind of personal archive of material connected with his life in the orphanage, and Ron was also one of the former residents of the orphanage who organized reunions for people who grew up in the orphanage. So these were activities and events which happened outside the formal structure of either the orphanage or of the current Aberlour Children's Charity, and it was the former residents, taking responsibility themselves to come together and to share memories and experiences. The project moved to looking at the contemporary situation in the current smaller residential children's homes that the charity runs in Scotland. And as the project progressed, it became clear that while young people were interested in the idea of creating an archive for the future, they felt that the overall responsibility for thinking about and keeping hold of information, material, and memory objects belongs to the adults. They argued that adults in the residential children's homes already took responsibility for memory keeping and record keeping, such as collating memory books and other material. And this additional responsibility of record keeping would create yet another point of difference for young people in care from other children. So this focus on the collective and the importance of the group was carried on by the project into a number of events which were held in 2023 and 2024, where the project tried to bring the various stakeholders together to talk about the work of the project. So these are really useful events where we brought together people with care experience, practitioners and care providers, policymakers, records managers and archivists, academics, and artists. And these events highlighted the values of sharing experiences, thoughts, and opinions and working practices across the various concerned sectors. And most importantly, by putting the voice of the care experience person at the center of things. So I shall finish up there. If you'd like to find out more, I shall drop a number of links into the comments box. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl. And really interesting points to raise about responsibility there. And I thought that was really interesting what you said about the response of the children, and feeling that it shouldn't be their responsibility, but it is our responsibility to put their voices at the centre. And I think that was really useful to have that kind of individual focus after the first two presentations. So if I could ask the speakers to turn their cameras back on, please. And then we do have a very short amount of time, 5 minutes or so, for questions. There have been a couple of questions come in, one of which I see has been answered already. But there is a specific one for you, Carl, about have you been in touch with, because there have been similar projects going on in other countries, so I presume you were in touch with them.
Yeah, I mean, in the time that I had, I obviously just focused on the Scottish half of this project. As I mentioned, it was a collaborative project, so we worked with archivists and social workers in Germany via the University of Osnabrück. And another element of the project, which I didn't have time to talk about here, was kind of looking at the similarities and differences between both record keeping and the kind of provision of care across the two separate countries and the two different record keeping traditions. So it was quite useful to have that point of difference, because I think particularly for the practitioners involved in providing care, I think they basically learned a lot from each other in terms of how care is provided in Scotland and Germany.
Great, thank you. And then I know there've been other projects in Australia and London and so on. So
I mean, I mean, there's a number of kind of key projects which we all refer to, which acted as kind of inspiration for the work that we did. Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you. Patrick, there's a question for you about AI, and in particular, sort of whether we require a deeper reflection in our use of AI, and whether you use AI, and if so, does it have particular implications if you're working with archives that relate to human rights?
Yeah, it's a good question, and maybe it's a question for all of us here, how AI has a role in our work. I'll say that, just from speaking with faculty at Duke and my own observation of students, I know that they are definitely using AI. I think we as information specialists maybe should think of ourselves as being role models for how to ethically and effectively engage AI and provide that modeling for students if they're not getting it. I know at Duke we have Duke University Libraries. We are engaging discussions about AI. We have an AI working group. They arrange discussions and readings that we're meeting regularly to think about AI. They've provided training for those who want it on how to develop prompting systems, how to use AI. So I think it's an ongoing conversation. I think for myself, I am at the point where I'm learning AI myself and trying to figure out what is an ethical, effective use of it. How can it support my work? When do I feel comfortable with it? When do I don't? So I think for me, it's an ongoing process. But again, I know it's being used and students are using it. And again, I feel that if I can have if I can discuss with them how to use AI, the ethics of AI use and the effectiveness of AI use, then I think I become a better resource information specialist for them.
Thank you, Patrick. Carl, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just to touch on that, we've had recent experience. We were participants in a project testing a new AI system to help us catalog our collections, and it was quite an interesting process. So we entered into the project in a kind of spirit of curiosity, and it also it was well timed for a project we were doing with an external partner where we didn't have the physical time to catalog the material ourselves. But basically, yeah, the kind of two things in terms of using AI for cataloging were the big issues for us were confidence in the accuracy of the metadata that was created and consistency in the results that came. So the jury's definitely still out for us.
Thank you. That was really useful to have that practical experience. And we have a question rather than an AI question, because I'm just looking at the time, but Jasper, there's a question in the chat there about, are you happy to answer that? About the question is the Hungarian government and its attitude to archivism, is it helping or hindering?
Yeah, thank you. Just if I have like 10 seconds to add my thoughts on the AI topic. Yeah, we are also in an experimental phase as part of the university. We are working with a group across the campus on how to use AI in higher education in the first place. We are teaching archives related courses, so we have an AI policy for our courses, which is already mandatory. It's in the curriculum. But in our work in the Archivum, we are still experimenting. We are a multilingual archive, so we use already machines for translating content and archival descriptions. We have a lot of audiovisual material in digital format, so we are looking at captioning and translation of various language content into English. So there are certain areas that we're trying to make use of AI, but currently we are just a little over past the information sessions on see how AI works and what is useful for us. Not so much in the implementation phase, unfortunately. And to the second question, I didn't have time to explain in more depth, but actually what we see as an indirect influence, there's no direct threat on the archives so far. Except that we see our constituencies, our partners in deep trouble, and of course solidarity and support goes out to everyone who works with us. But what we see is a limitation in cooperation with public institutions, which are including public archives, state archives, institutions of social memory, which are practically forbidden to cooperate with us. So when we create exhibitions or have on occasion requests to these institutions to give us copies of documents, photographs, other types of materials, our requests are oftentimes rejected. Simply because we are listed as or blacklisted as an institution with which cooperation is not possible. This is not true for all institutions, and we have still very good relations with middle to lower level managers there. But on the top level, it's a big no, and no, thank you.
Thank you for explaining that. And I guess my hope is that as an international community of professionals and people who have the same passion for archives, the more that we all understand what we're doing, the more that we can all help each other. So I'm aware of the time, and I think we do need to finish, but But I really would like to thank all of the speakers for their contribution to a fascinating session. And thank you very much to Jens and his colleagues in the Section for Archives and Human Rights, who I'm sure you'll be inspired to take forward some of this to your colleagues in that section, Jens. And also thank you to the ICA for their support in organising this, and to all of you for listening. And please take away what you've heard. And I particularly wanted to finish with Casper's quotation. You were talking about archiving as a problem to be explored. I think we could just have a whole hour session discussing that. So again, Jens, you wanted to say something?
Well, it's just sometimes there are interesting interconnections in history. In 1956, Hungarian archivist had to flee Hungary, and he went to Paris. He became the secretary of the ICA, the emblematic Mr. ICA, Charles Keskametti.
Exactly.
And just a few years just before he disappeared, I had the honor with Perrine Canavaggio to interview him, and he explained why he became an archivist in Hungary. And he said initially he wanted to become a historian, but because there was a repressive regime, he would have had to lie. So he said, I became an archivist because I didn't want to lie. I think that can still inspire us.
Yes, I think that's a really good point to finish on. So thank you, Jens. Yeah, and thank you to everybody for your participation. So we can finish there. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.